continuation of the discussion on the Yoga Sutras. This meeting will be recorded, so if you have missed any of the previous discussion sessions, you may find it on YouTube. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. I'll hand it over to Swami.
This meeting is being recorded.
Yogena chittasya padena vacham alam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakurotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranchaliranatosmi stuvei patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam katra sutrasya bhashyasya kramadvivaranasya cha. As an announcement, I want to mention to you that due to this heavy internet traffic, we are facing some problems on the YouTube. We can't avoid it this time because there are so many programs going on. So those who find it difficult to watch this event in the YouTube, you can watch this either in live stream or better still, Zoom. That be the better option. Okay, thank you. In the last session, we were discussing some of the very important elements of yamas and niyamas, these fundamental disciplines. Stages of higher life. What really happens when we get established in yamas and niyamas is that we get out of a kind of mental trap of thoughts, memories, ideas which actually stand in the way of our spiritual progress. We get out of this mental trap, we are able to break away from this mental trap. Now this mental trap is a kind of prison house made by our own samskaras, vasanas and vrittis and sankalpas, that is memories, impressions, tendencies, characteristics, habits and so on, which are accumulated in the mental system, which define, which regulate and determine our actions, the way our thoughts are formed, the way our emotions function, the way we respond to events outside, the way we interpret our own life, our own personality. This is a mental trap. Our own samskaras, the inherited samskaras, vasanas and vrittis. So that in a way make it difficult for us to do something that we want to do, because the power of old samskaras exerts such a great influence, so that even or when we try our best to get out of it, it's not easy. So when we practice these disciplines, what happens? The mind becomes more friendly. Some of the old samskaras, some of the old habits, tendencies get purified, and to that extent the mind slowly turns friendly. When we want to do something good and noble, mind is willing to cooperate. A typical sutra here is difficult to understand technically. See, look at the 37th sutra. That is Asteya Pradisthayam Sarvaratnopasthanam. That is sutra. Means when you get established in, let's say, self-abstention, say means abstaining from theft, which means not having a desire for possessing things that do not belong to us. So again, an expression of greed, possessiveness. When that happens, all jewels come to that person. Now this is the sutra. Now this should be understood properly. The commentators and the interpreters have thrown additional light. Otherwise, what do you mean by getting jewels? After all, we are not going for jewels. So the idea here is, jewel here stands for the best. What a normal person will desire, what we will wish to possess, the best, maybe the best job, a lot of wealth, best reputation, goodwill, everything that we want to acquire in very ordinary secular worldly sense. The best of that is the real meaning of ratna. Ratna means jewel, diamond, rubies, precious jewels that you buy in a jewelry shop. Mean the best, the costliest, the most expensive, the most difficult to acquire in that sense. So what does it mean? When you don't want anything, when you refuse to accept anything, when you are totally free from any kind of desire, then what you avoid, what you don't want, that comes to you. So the typical cultural background of spiritual traditions, you can see those who renounce everything, those who don't want anything. You may have a desire, well, let us give him something. If a person is very greedy, very possessive, and maybe even going to the extent of stealing things from others, extremely greedy and possessive and worldly minded. And if that person asks you for a favor, if you are a very cultured, civilized person, you will be rather reluctant to give him any help. I mean, you won't feel a great incentive, because you don't enjoy a great inner contentment or satisfaction or happiness by being of any assistance to him. Rather, you would say you are inclined, if a normal person, you are inclined to refuse. If a very greedy person who is not established in asteya, means who has not abstained himself from the habit of stealing, that's a literal meaning. It means those who are given to possessing things through unlawful means, of to greed, desire, playing tricks, you call con men, you mean tricksters, all those gamblers of a different type, those who reckless, ruthless adventurers who want to use their crooked means to take things from others. And if if such a person, let's say, comes to you asking for a favor, you would be rather reluctant to help him. On the other hand, suppose you find a great man or woman of renunciation. He doesn't want, or she doesn't want anything. She only wants to do good for others. She doesn't want reputation. She doesn't want wealth. She doesn't want anything. And suppose you have a lot of resources. If you are a cultured, noble-minded person, you will have a tendency, could I be of some assistance to you? You may like that. If a man like Buddha goes about walking in your neighborhood, you may perhaps prefer to ask him, can I do something for you? I can give an example. In 1893, Swami Vivekananda came to America. This is very interesting. It's a classical example. I can't think of a more obvious example. It's a historical fact, which is written by historians. Now, Vivekananda came to this country, and he was clad like a monk, and that too in Chicago. It was inhabited by the people from Europe that recently arrived from Europe, from Germany, or the Nordic countries. They were not acquainted with the person going about. So when, and he was a total stranger. He was an unknown person. And an American lady, Miss Hale, she watched our window in her drawing room, and she found this strange looking person, who is apparently a foreigner, who was sitting on a stone bench in front of a church across the street in Chicago. And this lady, an old lady, she came out and she inquired, "What's the matter with you? Why are you sitting here?" And she didn't anticipate this man to speak in perfect English, and he replied in perfect English, "See, I have come here to attend the Parliament of Religion." Now, and this lady immediately invited him. Even I think in this 21st century, I don't think it could happen, because whether we have gone backward or forward in the higher refinements or culture, we are not sure. This happened in 1893, and this lady invited this strange man Vivekananda to her home, gave him, maybe had given him food, arrangement for a shower, and next day she took him to the nearby Columbus Hall, where they had opened an office for registering the representatives who were coming from different parts of the world for attending the Parliament of Religion. From India many had come, but Vivekananda was something special, because he was not coming as a representative of any particular organization, institution. See, Swami Vivekananda's own kinsmen, his own people from his own city, like P.C. Majumdar came as a representative of Brahma Samaj, and many others came. And many other representatives came from different parts of the world, including Europe and Asia. But Vivekananda had come without any proper letter of introduction or anything. And she took him to the hall. Now, I will see Astaya Pradishtayam Sannidho Vairatya. He didn't have money. And in fact, he didn't have food also. The previous night he had slept in a discarded railway compartment. Maybe the most outstanding celebrity of the first Parliament of Religion spent his previous night without sleep in a discarded railway compartment. It was a goods train, what you call a train in which they must have transported coal. So you can imagine, not a very wonderful, not a very pleasant situation. Now, how did this lady feel like going to him? Can I do something to you? What's the matter? Why are you here? That's because the power of renunciation. This sometimes happens. You may call it miracle, that's one way of interpreting this. But Patanjali's greatness is he sees a logical link between cause and effect. When you practice certain great values, then unasked, unsought, unsolicited, you find people and things coming towards you for your own help. That's an example. On the other hand, there are people who struggle all their life for money. They do succeed in getting money, but they are not necessarily the happiest or the healthiest people in the world. But this Vivekananda, absolutely contented, absolute no anxiety, no worry, and no money, no recognition, had come for attending the Parliament of Religion, sitting on a stone bench right in front of a church, having spent the previous night in a discarded railway compartment. This is not a passenger's compartment. It is apparently it was railway wagon was used for transporting coal. So that's an interesting thing. So these things do happen. When a person is running away from wealth, wealth chases him. When a person is running away from power, power comes to him. When a person doesn't want reputation, the reputation comes to him. You can find this happening here. That's why Asteya Pradishtayam Tasannid Sarva Ratna Upasthanam. I mean, without any effort on our part, things just happen. That's the idea. These things happening, you can find in the lives of many great spiritual personalities. For a very simple reason, the most memorable incident that I can quote many, but one of them, maybe most striking incidents, is what you find in the Way of a Pilgrim, the autobiographical writing of a Russian mystic, the Way Pilgrim, a rustic villager, a simple man from a rustic village who just wanted to study, wanted to learn, wanted to master Jesus' prayer, going in search of a teacher, and suddenly, of course, he had to face a lot of problems. He was ambushed, was assaulted, and once it so happened that somebody took him to his home, and you find it was an important military official in the Tsar's army. This happened in the middle of 19th century. I'm just referring to the Way of a Pilgrim, the great Russian mystic that we learned to 19th century. And he was going in search without money, won't accept money, won't accept any favor from anybody, and people automatically opened their gates and hosted him. You can find. So this happens in all traditions. The next verse we already discussed, Brahmacharya Pradisthayam Virilabha, that we already discussed. The 39th verse is very important because it opens our eyes to certain aspects which we normally call mysteries. That is, the sutra is Aparigrahasthairye Janma Kathantada Sambodha, 39th sutra. Aparigrahasthairye, when you get established, aparigraha means when you get established in non-covetousness, that is 39th sutra. You don't aspire for anything. You are totally free from greed. You are fully established in non-covetousness. Then what happens? The dawn of knowledge of past and future births. This is the literal meaning. You mean Janma Katham Tada Sambodha. Katham Janma means how, who am I? Where am I coming from? Where was I born in my last life? And where am I going to be born in my next life? What were the different life cycles that I have gone through? All these mysteries, all these questions, katham, that means in Sanskrit. So all these questions are answered. You get an idea of the mysteries. So there you find, of course, I shall try to explain this in the light of the well-known verses from Vyasa's commentary. So Vyasa says, Bhashim Asyiti, means, I mean this sutra is being explained by Vyasa in his commentary. Kohamasam katham ahamasam kim sudidam kadam sudidam keva bhavishyamaha katham va bhavishyama iti evam asya Purvanta Paranta Madhyeshu Atmabhava Jignasa Surupena Upavartate. Purva Janma Sthiti Bodha means a person is able to remember his past lives. That is the idea given here. That is, now how does it happen? It's pure psychology. Of course, again you have to remember this can only be explained in the light of the law of karma and the doctrine of reincarnation or rebirth. When we get something from somebody according to the spiritual psychology of Vedanta and yoga. The tendencies and characteristics of the giver, the one who gives you something, the one from whom you receive something, it will be transferred to you. That's the idea behind. So sometimes this idea is explained in many other bhashyas also, Asammana tapo vruddhi sammana tapakshayaka. If you get respect and honor from everyone, then your good karmas, your good actions, your good merits of your previous life cycles, a fraction of it will be transferred to the account of the person who respects you. And if somebody dishonors you, then that person's, the person who doesn't do any honor to you, that person's good karmas will be transferred to you. This is a central principle in the doctrine of reincarnation and karma theory. That's why in some traditions people seek inconvenience. They want to go to places where they are not necessarily recognized or respected, because if they are respected, then they will have to give up some of their good merits, meritorious deeds coming from previous life. If they are respected, if they are not respected, then their own good spiritual characteristics will remain intact. If somebody, that's why people in certain ancient traditions are very eager to serve and help holy men and holy women, you find. The reason is, if you help a holy person, he has a huge account of merits, spiritual merits to his account. So you get some of them transferred to you. You are benefited. So you can find in ancient India, maybe this in Buddhism also, you find in the Abhidhamma, in the Sutta Pedaka, Vinaya Pedaka, Abhidhamma Pedaka, and so these are the three Pedakas: Sutta Pedaka, Vinaya Pedaka, Abhidhamma Pedaka. It is called three Pedakas, the three important Pali scriptural traditions of Buddhism. In the Abhidhamma, there are certain rules for monks to follow. Means monks should be very careful not to be too elevated when they are respected, and not to be angry when they are not respected. So and also you can, even now you find many of these ancient civilizations, they may not be aware of this particular sutra, but the point is, they feel and they believe, is a conviction that is being transmitted from generation to generations in families and societies. But if you should do some good work to a holy person, if you should help a holy person, then you will be benefited. If a person is poor, then his desire to become rich will be fulfilled because he has helped or served some holy persons. If you incur the wrath, the anger, by dishonoring and by doing harm to a holy person, then you may call it curse. It is not curse, it's a dark shadow. If you hurt a person, do harm to a person, and if he suffers, the sufferings will create a vibration, and the vibration will have it's an entity, it will follow you unless you neutralize it by doing something good to neutralize the bad effects of a bad action. So the tendency to do something good for holy persons is an interesting part of this tradition. So you can find this here. What happens is, by not accepting and by not doing anything wrong to a person, Vyasa says, Purvanta Paranta Madheshu Atmabhava Jignasa Surupena Upavartade, means the person's mental lake becomes crystal clear. We are not able to remember our previous life cycles. according to Patanjali system, because there are so many layers on the surface of the lake. So, we are not able to see the layers at the bottom level. When we are able to clean the upper layers, then you will be able to see the solid rock bottom of the lake. So, let us look upon our own mind as a lake, many layers of water. On the surface, the water is not very clean, so we are not able to see far deep into the bottom of the lake. When you don't receive anything from others, when you get established in non-covetousness, total freedom from desire, what happens? You are not acquired other people's samskaras, negative samskaras, impressions, by seeking their help, by blindly accepting things that you don't need. So, mind remains calm because all the dirty, filthy layers are not forming on the surface of the mental lake. So, such a person will be able to see and look into his own past life. This explains the Jataka tales of Buddha. Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree for meditating. Ihasane sushyudu me sharidam tugastimam samcha vilayam chiyatu aprapya siddhim bihujanma durlabham naivasanat kayamatas chalishide. In the Buddha Vijaya, in the Buddha's life, it is mentioned, this is very strong language in this Sanskrit verse. I am going to sit under this tree, I am going to meditate. I won't get up from the seat till I get the highest spiritual enlightenment. And he meditated, he prayed, meditated for years and years. And his mind became calm and quiet, pure, aparigraha. For years he did not accept anything from anyone. He was totally free from all desires. Mind became pure, like a crystal clear lake. So from the surface, if you look, you can see the rock bottom, different layers of the water. So 543 previous life cycles came up, and with each one he did not identify with any of those experiences of previous life cycles. He detached and de-identified, so they did not have any impact on him. So that's why he remembered all his past life cycles. This idea behind. So that is the essence of Vyasa's commentary. So Vyasa says, what happens, that means the ability to see into previous life cycles, and also the future life cycles also will become very clear to the yogi when he practices this aparigraha. That's the idea behind. Non-acceptance. What happens, when we don't accept anything, when our mind becomes crystal clear, then our obsessive attachment to this body disappears. Then what happens? We had so many bodies in the past life cycles, so the previous life cycles become clear, appear in our mental horizon as pictures or images. Such a yogi is able to recollect the previous life cycles. That is the idea behind. Of course, there are ayamatma purva sharirat pretya sharirandharamapanna kshutpididha purvabhyasta ahara manusmaran stanyam abhilashati. This is a very interesting principle, is frequently quoted in the Nyaya Sutras. So the idea behind is, we have already a huge storehouse of previous samskaras coming from previous life cycles. So that explains the natural tendency in the Sanskrit verse which I quoted, but it means is a tiny calf, when it's born, it approaches its mother to drink milk. It has not learned that in this life, but that the tiny calf had already acquired this instinct When I am hungry or thirsty, I should approach my mother. So it approaches its mother in search of milk. So many of our reflex actions, our natural non-anticipated impulses and feelings are vindications of the reality of previous life cycles and the samskaras we have already acquired in previous life cycles. So that is the essence of this particular sutra, that is aparigrahasthairi janma kathantada sambodha. Now next one is of course Saujat Swanga Jugupsa Paraihi Asamsargaka. Here external purity is implied here. And the next, that is 41st sutra, internal purity. So the 40th sutra, sutra number 40, discusses what is called Bahya Saujam, external purity. What it says is, suppose you go on cleaning your body, thinking that you can actually make your body clean by all kinds of everything this way. Of course, I don't want to mention the names of those interesting things that people do to make their body look beautiful. But what happens, of course, eventually every thinking person will realize that total beautification of the human body is a hypothetical impossibility, to use a ponderous language. It is a hypothetical impossibility. How can we really make our body externally pure? In the sense, physically, outwardly it can of course become pure, but again in no time it can become anything other than the embodiment of purity. So it doesn't mean that we should not practice hygiene or anything. What it means is, at that point we start thinking about a higher concept of purification. So it is actually a person who observes extreme cleanliness and hygiene, if he has the right attitude, he will later graduate into a higher idea of cleanliness. That is why it is very important for every yoga practitioner, every spiritual practitioner to follow the principles of hygiene and cleanliness. It is generally mentioned. A person may transcend the idea of physical cleanliness, but that is a gradual evolution that happens, not a matter of our own decision. So actually Vyasa himself writes here, Swange jugupsayam saujam arabhamanaha kaya avidyadati kaya anabhishwanki bhavati. So what happens, when a yogi, a higher spiritual seeker, when he goes on practicing external purity, if he is a very thinking person, then he will reach a point where he perceives the imperfections of the body, its innate, inherent imperfections, because body can never be perfect in the absolute sense of the word. It is by its very nature imperfect. So what happens, when this happens, a state develops on the part of the yogi. He understands that bodily health, hygiene, cleanliness are important, but it is impossible for anyone to keep the body eternally clean with a single bath. But there is another kind of purification that we should aspire for, that is internal purification, called abhyantara saucham. So that is why in the yoga tradition, in the Vedantic tradition, in ancient hermitages. If you have an option, well, suppose somebody gets an option, either he can be physically pure, can take a bath and all the wonderful things, or mental purity. From a spiritual perspective, mental purity is more important. But for a beginner, the beginning stage always begins with the observation of external purity, because once we focus enough on external purity, what happens is we realize that external purity in the absolute sense is something non-attainable. It doesn't mean that we should not observe the fundamental principles of cleanliness and hygiene. They are very important in yoga and spiritual practice, but there is a higher idea, a transcendental idea of purification or purity, that is mental purity. So that's how one graduates and evolves from bahya shaucha, external purity, to abhyantara shaucha, internal purity. That's how it's in some cases this evolution could take some life cycles. Remember this very well. Yoga, especially Ashtanga Yoga, we should always remember Ashtanga Yoga should be understood exclusively in the light of a strong conviction in the principle of reincarnation, rebirth, and law of karma. Suppose a person practices, let us say, a lot of these spiritual disciplines. You find, let's say, and let's say yamas and niyamas and all these he practices to his best of his ability, prayer, meditation, so on. Then what happens, suppose, and if he passes away, if his life comes to an end before he actually attains his goal? Suppose he had an accidental death and the person doesn't really succeed in acquiring the highest spiritual goal in yoga. Does it mean that his whole effort will go waste? Yoga says and Vedanta says it doesn't go waste. So you can find this frequently in many instances. Sometimes small little children, 5-year-old, 4-year-old, 6-year-old children, suddenly manifesting extraordinary powers, aesthetic powers. I am not talking about the ability to remember the number of vehicles or the ability to memorize the names of countries and their capitals, because those skills do not really go very deep and become spiritual tendencies. I am talking about music, higher music, classical music, higher art, interest in higher philosophy, spiritual ideas. Suppose you find small children displaying, there are a few instances, even now we can see in the world, 4-year-old, 5-year-old children are able to give concerts on classical music, playing or maybe singing complicated compositions belonging to 14th century or 15th century or 16th century, in a way that professional musicians who are trained for 50 years, maybe 30 years, cannot even dream of achieving. Again, remember, these are all very rare instances, but they are not just stories, they are facts. How do you explain this? In the light of yoga, there can be logical explanation, whether we believe it or not. A typical yoga, I am not talking about yoga asana, I mean yoga psychology, Patanjali yoga system. It tells you that, suppose a great musician who is a very pious person, who has spent his whole lifetime to acquire extraordinary powers in music, mysticism, philosophy, and so on. But he had a desire. Nobody recognized him because he did not get any recognition, any applause from anybody. That becomes a painful memory. But he's a nice person, he must have prayed to God. If he's born again, he'll be born in a family where his parents will help him, encourage him to continue his musical training even when he's an infant, and he will suddenly start showing these extraordinary skills. Some of the commentators in the yoga tradition, they compare this. You suppose you are digging a well, and there is no water maybe for 100 feet. Suddenly you hit a rock, and immediately a big spring bursts forth, and the lake or maybe the well becomes full of pure water. So that way, Suchinam Simadam Gege Yoga Brashtobhijayate, in the Gita says. So any such skills, any such extraordinary powers in whatever may be, what happens, that person will be able to continue the manifestation of his skills in the next life. So you can find, but remember, this happens only when he has a spiritual tendency. I can see this. There is a Bible statement, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto him. This happens actually. If a person has a spiritual attitude but did not get enough recognition for his skills, he may not be a big saint, but he is certainly a great person, no doubt. Then what happens? In his next life, he will be born in a set of circumstances where things will automatically come to him instead of without his making a lot of effort to acquire them. It's a strange phenomenon. Anyway, this is one way of explaining some of the principles explained here. Asteya pradisthayam sarvaratnopasthanam brahmacharya pradisthayam virilabha, and then abrigrahasthaire janma katantata sambodha, etc. Now we will go to the next sutra, that is Sattva Shuddhi Saumanasya Egagri Indriya Jaya Atmadarshana Yogitvani Cha. It means Sattva Shuddhi Saumanasya Aikagriya Indriya Jaya Atmadarshana Yogyadani Cha Bhavanti. Sattva Shuddhi. So what happens? Through this purification, through the practice of internal purity, that is the theme, the central topic discussed in the 41st Sutra. Sattva Shuddhi comes, that is purification of mind. Then Saumanasya means a pleasantness of feeling. It is not smiling all the time, hi, how are you, everything is fine. Not that kind of external mannerism. That's very important. In fact, many people fall sick because they suppress all their emotions inside and they have to smile all the time. So this contradiction actually creates a lot of tension. On the other hand, if there is total transparency between what we feel within and what we express outside, there is less scope for tension and conflict and anxiety. So here Saumanasya is the word used. Saumanasya here means pleasantness of feeling, a kind of deep sense of inner serenity and tranquility. That comes as a result of observing internal purity or mental purity. Purity at the level of attitudes, emotions, feelings, impulses, and so on. And then next one is Aikagriya. Aikagriya actually means one-pointedness, an ability to concentrate on anything without effort. That is an important point. Effortless skill to concentrate on something, because we all can concentrate with the great effort, but a yogi will be able to concentrate without any effort. the effortless skill to concentrate on something. That's a result of observing the principles of internal purity, mental purity. Because there are no contradictory thoughts or conflicting ideas, etc. going on. You see, such persons may not be physically very muscular. When we talk about external purity, internal purity, physical cleanliness, etc., we are not talking about muscular strength or physical strength, not at all. It means that the health, mental health means serenity, a sense of peace, a sense of contentment, an ability to remain even-minded without being shaken by a tragedy or by an unpleasant event, or the tendency to get elated, overjoyed when something pleasant happens. The ability to keep an equilibrium, a sense of balance, internal balance of the mind, that is the idea behind here. And along with that internal balance, one should be able to focus. When we normally focus in the ordinary sense, actually there is a slight imbalance taking place at the mental level. You focus on something with extreme effort, actually there is an imbalance happening. But a yogi will be able to focus without losing this inner balance. That is the idea of Aikagryam, Indriya Jaya. Indriya Jaya means control of the senses. And then Atma Darshana Yogyatani. So, Atma Darshana Yogyatani means these are the qualifications for realizing one's Atman. This is a description of the dynamics of acquiring internal purity. Of course, here Vyasa's commentary, those who read Vyasa's commentary in translation, we should know Bhavantidi Vakya Seshaka. So, what it means is Bhavanti, it will be like that, it is, that means plural. That should be considered to be part of the sentence which is not seen there, but it completes the sentence, which means the idea is Sattva-shuddhi, Saumanasya, Aigagra, Indriya-jaya, Atma-darsana yogitvani cha bhavanti. That is the full sentence. Vyasa in his commentary says, Suchehe Sattva-shuddhis tataha, Saumanasyam tata Aigagryam, tata Indriya-jaha, tatascha Atma-darsana yogitvam buddhi-sattvasya bhavati. Means it happens in the chronological order. That means a yogi, when he practices inner purification of the heart and mind, he actually is progressing towards mental bliss, spontaneous feelings of joy. That means from mental bliss develops one-pointedness, which leads to subjugation of senses. From there, your ability, the buddhi, the intellect develops the power of realizing Atman. And not only that, the evils of arrogance, pride, attachment, all these are completely removed, and a sense of inner serenity, peace, and effortless feeling of bliss will be the result of practicing internal purity. The question arises, how do we achieve this? That's an important part of this discussion, because Bahya Saujam, external purity, is quite understandable. Means you keep your body clean. Actually, before we practice either asana or pranayama or meditation or prayer, it is important for us to practice external purity. That's an important thing. Of course, I already discussed here external purity. Paraihi asamsargaha. When a person practices external purity, and when he understands that external purity really has its own inherent limitations, because body can never be always clean, because you can only clean the outer skin bag, but inside you cannot clean them, of course. So the point, out of this a person develops not a hatred for the body, but a transcendental outlook. There is something higher, something transcendental, something much more sublime that I should look for. And from this the person develops a kind of total detachment from any unpleasant, undesirable contacts with others. That's the idea behind. So that is understandable. But what about internal purity? Internal purity means acquiring a kind of inner serenity and peace and inner cleanliness of mind and heart. How do we do that? By acquiring more and more spiritual, what do you call, sattvic tendencies, virtuous tendencies. So how do we acquire tendencies? We know how we develop unpleasant tendencies, but how to develop pleasant tendencies? By reading, by association with people who is known for these higher qualities. Because when you come in contact with a person consciously and discusses ideas or anything, actually you will be influenced if that person is a spiritually oriented person. You will get something. When you read a book, you get something. When you listen to higher spiritual music, you get something. So there are different ways of acquiring elements of internal or mental purity. And as we go on acquiring more and more of these spiritual energy resources, spiritual ideas, spiritual resources, then our mind naturally will develop a tendency to move in the direction of everything that is sublime and spiritual. And how do we define whether it's something sublime or spiritual? Something that gives us a deep sense of lasting contentment. So many yoga psychologists will tell you, it's a very, of course it's an elaborate process, but one simple way of testing whether we are getting some positive ideas, whether we are being benefited, spiritually benefited by associating with certain people, or by reading a book, or by listening to a great music. The test is, are we able to experience a sense of deep contentment? Bliss is the word used, Ananda is a word used in the technical language, but in plain English we can say a deep sense of inner serenity, peace and contentment by doing something noble, by speaking something noble, by associating with people who are refined, noble hearted, from whom we normally expect positive ideas, positive thoughts and so on. That's one way of testing whether it is helping us to acquire this inner purity, mental purity called abhyantara saucham. That's the idea behind. That's one way of acquiring more and more of this the inner purity. And along with this, you will find once we attain this higher spiritual impulses, we will also develop a feeling of aversion towards something negative, the undesirable tendency. It's not hatred, but a feeling of moving away from something undesirable, something that can create conflicts in our mind, create confusion in our mind, because they are the opposite of mental purity. They agitate the mind. Mental impurity creates agitation and conflicts in the mind. Mental purity creates harmony, peace and tranquility in the mind. That's one way of testing. Now we have interaction maybe for half an hour. Most welcome. Yeah.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yeah, namaskar. Yeah.
I appreciated your insight about the purification of the body externally and internally.
Yeah.
The question I would like to ask you is, how does one overcome the feeling, I am this body?
Yeah. It's again, that feeling can be reduced slowly and can be eventually overcome by um, acquiring the opposite thoughts. See, if you think of, after all, what the human body is all about, you ask any doctor, anybody who works in any hospital, or you can have a discussion with somebody who is managing a crematorium. It is an obvious physical fact. Every child knows that this body has its own limitations. So this constant thought, it should not become a negative. Remember, not a negative word. We should never get away with the impression that yoga is a life-negating philosophy which negates, refuses to accept the reality of life. Not at all. It helps you to look for something higher without giving up. Remember, that's the idea behind. So one way to do that is to think of the true nature of the human body mechanism. Remember, I always want to remind you, yoga is very positive. Even yoga and also Vedanta place a lot of importance on physical health. That's why the very concept of asana was devised by by the authors of Gheranda Samhita or Hatha Yoga Pradipika and others, just to help us to maintain a strong and healthy body. If you have a healthy body, the body will not create too many problems for you. But then we should always remember of the fundamental nature of the human body mechanism, without developing a feeling of disgust or aversion or hatred, but that will help us to look towards something higher, something transcendental. That's the idea behind. And then association with these ideas, by listening, by reading, gradually we will understand. That's all. Our goal should not be to develop an aversion to the body, not at all. Rather, our goal should be to develop the ability to look for something higher than the physical. That's the idea behind. To go for something higher and not to look down upon the human physical body. So physical body is a wonderful instrument for us to think of something other than and beyond the physical. It helps us in a way.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, thank you.
Go ahead, Yogi. Your turn to ask question.
Maharaj.
Yeah. No.
Hatha Yoga places a lot of importance on cleansing the body, like Neti, Dauti,
Yeah.
Bhakti,
Yeah.
all the other
True. Yeah.
kriyas.
Yeah.
How much importance should we give to that process for body cleansing? And second related question is Ahara Shuddha, Sattva Shuddhi.
Yeah.
How much importance should we put on
Yeah.
the
That's right. That's right. Now first, coming to the Vasti, Nedi, all these are all purificatory practices for keeping the body strong. Kaya Chikitsa, there are many methods developed by Indian schools of medicine, including this, to keep the body strong and healthy. That's good. So that's important. But many of the great spiritual teachers India produced were great practitioners of some of these great disciplines of Hatha Yoga, really speaking. They didn't go through the whole thing. Professional Hatha Yogis were different. They live long years and they spend the whole lifetime in practicing these disciplines. the Ashtanga Yoga places importance on something higher and transcendental. That's the idea behind. So all the Vasti, Nauli, Nedi, these are all different practices for keeping the body, physical body, the inner part of the physical body included, healthy and strong. And second point you mentioned, what is the second question you mentioned?
Ahara Siddha.
Oh yeah, Akara Suddho Sattva Suddho Kriya Phalagariyatam. So it is found in the Upanishad also, it is found in the yoga tradition also. Now food has two levels of purity, actually more than two levels. One is the physical purity, hygiene of the food, and then the accidental purity, and then a higher level of purity. Suppose your food is very clear, very clean, very hygienically prepared, nutritious, but if you eat that food with a very strong negative tendencies, or if it is served to you by a person with a curse, let us give an example. I am just giving an example without any pleasant feeling. Then that food, according to yoga, psychology and Upanishad Vedantic tradition, that food actually gets polluted. It's called a nimitta dosha, accidentally. If a person who cooks it, who cooks with very negative thought currents, serves to you openly, actually you will be affected, your mind will be affected. You will not fall sick physically, but your emotional health could be affected. That's what yoga tells you. Physically you will fall sick only if it is not prepared with keeping the principles of hygiene and health. Then only physical body will fall sick. But mind can be affected even if the food is hygienically prepared, but served and cooked without by persons who are full of negative feelings. That's what happens. Then another third, higher level of purity of food is when you eat that food as part of a yajna. That is in the Gita, in Brahma Arpanam, Brahma Havi, Brahma Agno, Brahmana Kudam. So the idea is whatever you offer and the thing in which you offer, the one who are offering, and the whole act of offering, food, eating, cooking, everything is a spiritual act. So this is one thing. Are you able to hear?
There is some disturbance from you.
Yeah. Eh? Eh, eh?
The recording has stopped.
Yeah. What happens? Huh. Yeah.
This system is creating a noise.
You asked him to switch off that.
Sunil Bhattacharya. Oh yes.
Sunil Bhattacharya, can you hear
This
me?
meeting is being recorded.
Hello,
It's
Sunil.
clear, Maharaj.
Can
Now
you?
it's clear. Neeru, go ahead. You ask your question.
Okay, can you hear? Okay.
Yes, Maharaj, it's all clear now.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So,
Hi, Swamiji.
I have a question about something. You said for the people who might agitate our mind, it's a helpful piece of information so that we don't have to associate with them, and it can help with in mental purity. And it made me think of a previous lecture where you talked about, I think the noise issue is still there. Is it okay if I continue, or shall I wait? Okay. So that made me think of a previous lecture where you talked about the kleshas and raga and vesha, and I'm curious to understand, like, sometimes when we do feel an aversion or a strong liking to something, is that helpful information for us to not do those things or do more of those things, or should we just generally cultivate a sense of detachment to everything? Like, should we just not have those strong feelings of attachment or aversion or liking, or are they actually helpful pieces of information for us to decide what we do? Does that make sense?
Yeah, you can practice detachment, that's wonderful. But there's a problem with the recording, and
Okay.
can you shut that particular phone, particular connection? Okay. What you asked, I mean, I could not clearly hear that because of the disturbance, but you are talking about following the discipline of detachment. It's always healthy and helpful, right? Thank you.
No, can I repeat my question in case you can hear me better?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm curious. So today you mentioned that if there are people who agitate our mind and affect our mental purity, then we can not associate with them so that it doesn't affect us.
Yeah.
In a previous lecture, you mentioned kleshas and raga and vesha and not having strong aversion or liking for things. And I'm curious whether sometimes it's helpful to use the information of whether we like something or dislike something to help adjust who we associate with or what we do.
Yeah, if you can keep yourself tuned to a higher idea, that will help you to be detached when you are exposed to negative influences, negative ideas. The detachment is certainly a useful tool, no doubt. And right, what we mentioned just now is the problem of food. Somebody mentioned ahara suddho sattva shuddhi, etc. So food in a way affects the mind in a very subtle, abstract way. The food that we eat, if it is healthy and nutritious and hygienically prepared, it will be good for physical health, muscular health. It will not make us sick. We will be healthy physically. But our mind can be affected if a very hygienically prepared food is served without a positive attitude on the part of the person who serves you. That's the idea behind. Again, remember, this cannot be stretched to the present context in this modern 21st century when you can't have any control on what kind of food you are eating and how it is prepared or served, of course. So that's why I mentioned later the Gita in one verse tells whatever you eat and you are the one you are eating, everything is an expression of the divine. So if this you can meditate and think of this prayer, that actually neutralizes all the negative elements associated with food. The subtle impurities can be neutralized. That's the idea behind.
Maharaj, question from my side.
Yeah.
You touched upon the concentration part and the attention.
Yeah.
Can you expand upon it, and how can we improve the level of concentration in the activities that we are doing? What prepares us and enhances our ability to concentrate?
I think concentration can be increased when if we can keep our mind calm and quiet. Disturbance in concentration is the result of agitated mind. When you try to concentrate immediately, mind creates problems. That's why we are not able to concentrate. So we should have an even-minded attitude to work that we are doing. The disturbance in concentration is always linked to our anxiety and worry and concern for the work and its result. Actually, worries, often anticipated problems, challenges, anticipated failures. Sometimes we expect, we anticipate, we fear, very often without any reason. So these can be reduced by taking a fresh look at the very idea of work and duty. We should do our best. Then naturally, anything that we do to the best of our ability with a calm attitude and mind will be effective. And then when our mind becomes too concerned about the result, then we should always remember that's not in our hands. We should let me focus on the work itself. But the result, when we worry too much about the result, then we should know result is the natural byproduct of the mind. And if we are concerned too much about the result at the time of doing work, then naturally concentration will be disturbed and work also will suffer. So we should focus on the work itself. It's called work is a yajna, karma yoga, all these ideas are enumerated in Vedantic literature. Work as a yajna, as a duty, so dharma, do our best in the best possible way, and then don't be concerned about it. This is the only way, really speaking. All other modern practices, it may help you to some extent, but a solid philosophy of work as karma yoga, as a yajna as we call it, is the only solution to disturbances.
Thank you.
Hari Om Swamiji.
Hari Om.
Swamiji, we talk a lot about attachment in the sense that we attach to a higher ideal to detach ourselves from a lower ideal, and this is something we use as a ladder to climb on this journey of understanding ourselves. So, in the very last stage, we need to stop attaching to anything at all, right? So, how does that happen? Because the way I understand it, you always detach from a lower ideal only when you attach to a higher ideal. So, when does this end?
Yeah, that is an automatic process. So a person who gets attached to a higher ideal will develop a higher sense of detachment. That detachment is different from detaching from negative ideas. The higher detachment is called anasakti. That is something that every person will eventually reach when he takes up the journey of life by attaching himself to a higher ideal. That's the idea at the hand. And when you attach yourself to a higher ideal, as you mentioned, you naturally detach yourself from anything lower. So as a result of this dedication to higher ideal, you will eventually reach a higher perspective, when you will be able to look upon detachment and attachment both as something irrelevant. You transcend both. That is called that is the last stage in karma yoga practice. We know karma yoga means when karma drops, yoga continues. Yoga never stops. Yoga means this connecting to a higher ideal. That's what we live with when we cannot do karma action any longer. So there is a higher detachment that's beyond attachment and detachment, that equation. That's the idea. That is called karma nishtha, yoga nishtha, yajna, all that find in Gita, Vedantic literature. There are descriptions of this higher ideal.
Pranam Swamiji.
Yeah.
I have a question regarding the fourth stage of dharana.
Fourth stage of dharana.
No, on the fourth stage of Patanjali Yoga Sutra, dharana, which is.
Yeah, remember that we will discuss when we come to that. Dharana comes later. Dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Dharana, yeah, dharana, samadhi is the 8th, dhyana is 7th, and dharana is the 6th. So dharana, dhyana, samadhi, we will take up that in course of time. Maybe within a few days. Okay? Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you for these wonderful questions. We will conclude now. I would.
There is
Yeah.
one more question.
Excuse me, I want to request some of our students here. I think there was a disturbance, so those who are handling their own computers in your end, please be mindful of the inconvenience that others may face if your handling of the computer, your machine on your end creates disturbance. If there is any problem, you just switch off and you will be able to listen to a program on the YouTube maybe today itself. So if at any point any of you happen to face any problem at your end, a computer problem, anything, just switch off. That's the kindest thing you can do, and then you will be able to watch this program later on. Will be in the YouTube itself. Okay, thank you. Please continue. Yeah. Yeah, please continue.
Sriram, you have a question?
Yeah, please.
Go ahead.
Most welcome.
I had a question about the distinction between asteya and aparigraha.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Asteya, literally it means abstention from a tendency to steal, and aparigraha is the abstention from a tendency to receive gifts from others. So now, what I mean, I shall again, if you want, I can explain further. Okay, so just a minute. So you see, asteya pradisthayam sarva ratna upasthanam. If a person doesn't have any desire for possessing things that belong to others, then in course of time, when he pradisthaya means when he reaches the highest state of being established in that discipline, what happens, he reaches a point when everyone who sees him will feel like giving him their best, whatever they want. So a donor may offer things to him because he has no desire for anything. If he internally practices this discipline, this abstention from theft, what happens is he may develop a personality. Remember, these practices will change our personality. The way we behave, the way we look, and the way we live. It will create an aura. Aura is not something occult or something like that. It is, everyone, all of us have an invisible personality along with a visible personality. When we talk about a person, well, he is the kind of person whom I can approach, but he has a particular aura, a personality. He is a helpful person. You feel I can approach him. You may say, well, I don't think he is very helpful. He has a different personality. Similarly, there is an invisible aura around us. So when a person gets fully established in this discipline, what Patanjali means is he will develop a personality. So everyone will feel like offering the best he has to him. It is Sarva Ratna. Ratna here means the most auspicious, the most precious thing that you have. That is your Ratna. Ratna doesn't mean diamond, rubies or anything like that. That's the meaning here. Ratna here means the most auspicious, the best. So that tendency will come to a person. This skill, this great aura will come to a person who is fully established in this spiritual discipline. Similarly, aparigraha. When you don't receive anything, what happens? Your mind is no more affected by other people's samskaras. As I mentioned, when you acquire something, when you receive a gift from another person, a little bit of the characteristics of the giver will be transferred to your personality. You will be affected. Those who always become dependent upon others for everything, without making any effort of his own, actually he becomes a mental slave. I don't mean to say that everyone should, I don't mean that to say that. People who are parasitical by nature, who don't make their own efforts to acquire anything, who is always dependent upon others, who don't make any contribution to society. Actually, what happens? Their personality gets affected. So if a person develops the ability or the skill, the discipline, gets established in this discipline, he doesn't want anything from anyone. He doesn't require anything from anyone. So what happens, his mind is not affected. Otherwise, some of the characteristics of the giver will be transferred to the receiver's personality, and to that extent, his mind will be, mind will get an additional layer, a wheel. So it will make it difficult for him to remember anything, because there are more and more layers in the mental league. So what Patanjali says is, if a person is steadfast in his practice of non-receiving of things, non-acquisition for others, what happens, then his mind becomes pure. So it is a lake again. From the top of the lake, you can see deep into the lake. There is no dirt, no filth, no bacteria, nothing. You can see the bottom of the lake when you look at the lake. So, like that, such a person will be able to see the bottom of his own life cycles. He will be able to remember his previous life cycles. That's why I gave the example of Buddha. Buddha, as he started meditating, as years went by, and he continued his spiritual practices, his mind became pure like a lake, so he could see his own previous life cycles. And in the Jataka tales, you find Buddha's previous life cycles are described. 543 or 42 life cycles he went through, and all that he remembered. Not that he immediately lost his balance, no. He remembered and he de-identified, he detached himself from it, and he eventually, there's an ascending order of reincarnations. He was born in the animal kingdom, then he was born as a wise king, he was born as a philosopher, he was born as... there are so many innumerable life cycles, ascending order of evolution. And the last of his ascent was, he was born as a prince, a Siddhartha. And in this life cycle, he became the enlightened one, the Buddha. That's how the Jataka tales goes. So that's the idea behind. Now remember, these things may look a bit hypothetical. Many portions of the Yoga Sutras, we should not immediately try to find an explanation in 21st century. How can I remember my previous life cycle? We should not immediately start an adventure or some kind of an effort. Let me remember what I was in my previous life. No. Some of these ideas we may even be able to grasp intellectually only when we take up yoga practices, especially meditation. Dharana, dhyana, at that level only we'll be able to even make sense of many of these ideas in the Yoga Sutra. Many of the Yoga Sutra ideas are very clear, even can be explained in the light of modern psychology and psychiatry. But many of these ideas can only be explained at a higher level beyond our our present tools, available tools in psychology and psychiatry. So that's idea.
Maharaj, you might have just answered the last question that is there, very similar.
We can conclude now. I think it's already 7:30. Take care most well. One more question perhaps, Yeah.
Swamiji, you already answered my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I wrote about the recalling our previous life's memories. So you explained it very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We can conclude, Maharaj.
Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tatsat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
The recording has stopped.